evening. I'm calling to order the special meeting of the Board of Education. Today is Monday, December 17th, and we are meeting at the Fordyce building. Would you please stand and join me in the pledge and then remain standing? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you'd please join me in a moment of silence for the tragic loss of children and teachers in Connecticut. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mrs. DeAngelis.
Here.
Mrs. Lysy.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Sudar.
Here.
Mrs. Van Hope.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. I'm sure it's on the minds of everyone today going back to school. And all we can pledge is we will do our best to keep your children safe when they come to our schools. Unfortunately, no one can prevent everything, but please understand that we take your children seriously. They are our children too, and we will do the best we can to protect them. At this time, is there anyone who would like to speak relative to the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to some recognitions and reports. Mr. Bell?
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm very, very happy this evening to recognize some students. And I want to just read the resolution. It says, whereas approximately 180 Euclid High School students participated in the American Legion American examination, which consisted of questions that covered federal, state, county, local government, the United States flag, and United States Constitution. And whereas 2 students in each grade level with the highest scores had the opportunity to have their examination papers submitted for competition at the state level, and now therefore it be resolved that the Euclid Board of Education extends congratulations to these students for their success at the local level of this competition, which has brought recognition to themselves and to the Euclid City School District. And this is a very difficult competition, and so our hats are off to all of those students, and we want to recognize them this evening.
Call the roll, please.
We need a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. We need a motion. Sorry. Moved by Mrs. Sudar. Second? Second. By Mrs. Lysy. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Lysy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mrs. Sudar.
Yes.
Mrs. Van Hope.
Yes.
Mrs. DeAngelis.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
What we usually do is go up there and then present. Okay, what we'll do is call them up by name.
Sure.
On their grade level.
And yeah, I don't know if all the students are here, but we'd like to recognize them even in their absence. The first one is 12th grade student is Noah Brown. Second is Alexis McGee. Aaron Hock. Christina Kruziak. Let's give Christina a round of applause. Alante Herbert, and Samaya Sanders. Those are the students. I'll just assume that all the other students are just back doing homework, and that's the reason why I get that.
Yeah, you did yours, right? Yeah.
Got yours done. So congratulations to you and all of your classmates. This is an outstanding achievement, and we're very, very proud of you. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. And would the parents stand up, please? Who are here? Or family, I should say family, who's here with their sister and baby.
too, just before we move on, I just want to congratulate the parents too, because I realize that it doesn't happen this doesn't happen with the student by themselves. So parents, again, congratulations to you and your efforts, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with your students. So thank you very much, and thanks for being here this evening too.
Next one's yours.
Next on the agenda, we have two presentations this evening, and I just want to set a little bit of context to both presentations. What we are going to do this evening is to give the Board of Education and our viewing public, along with those in the audience, an opportunity to give a snapshot of what's going on in our buildings. And the first presentation we have will come from Bluestone Elementary. And before we begin, the thought here is that what we want to try to do is to set context and let the Board of Education know what our kids are doing, what our buildings are doing, and the progress that they are making. And so tonight I'm real happy to have Bluestone staff here, and very excited about their presentation. So I'm going to turn the introduction over to Assistant Superintendent John Schweitzer.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Vasic, Superintendent Bell. I have the honor this evening of introducing Linda Knight, principal of Bluestone Elementary, who will be leading the Bluestone school presentation regarding school improvement this evening. Linda will then introduce the other members of her team. With that, Linda Knight.
Good evening, Madam President, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Treasurer, and members of the board. I'd like to introduce our team. We have Frank Shirato, the assistant given a promotion. Not yet. We have Frank Shirato, the assistant principal. We have Margot Smolik, our literacy coach. Please stand. We have Nina Zuzek, our math coach. We have Cherie Mason, our interventionist. Olivia Jackson, our third grade teacher, and Julianne Yo, our kindergarten teacher. Thank you. The mission of Bluestone is to educate the whole child by providing them with a nurturing learning environment where they're respectful to themselves and others, and they work for their highest academic potential. Our vision is that every day our students will participate in 21st century skills. They will contribute globally in a competitive society and become lifelong learners. I'm going to present the climate data. K-5 reading data will be presented by Mrs. Smolik, and the K-5 math data will be presented by Mrs. Zuzek. The action steps that Bluestone has in place for staff include data discussions. We talk about the classroom referrals and what we're going to do differently to reduce that number. There's also a monthly referral chart that's displayed in our hallway right outside the main office. We also provide our lunch staff with training and collaboration each month. We think it's really important that we work together as a team because we do have quite a few referrals at lunchtime. Another important part of our day is the morning meeting that takes place in every classroom. It sets the tone for what we want the students to do that day. We're going to try something new this year. We're going to use logical consequences with our classroom teacher. By that I mean, instead of having the classroom teacher write a referral because a student has thrown a crayon across the room, we're going to take the crayons and then have a conversation with that student about how to use that material. Also, we're going to try home visits. We find that we need to reach out to our families, and we think by engaging in home visits and working with the parents to clearly show what we expect from our students while they're at school, that that's going to make a difference. Our students participate in the Bluestone Promise. Now you have a packet that has information about what that promise is. The students say that as part of morning meeting. We also have school-wide expectations, and there is material in your packet that talks about what we expect our students to do. Our Bluestone students are expected to listen, learn, and achieve every single day. We also have, you have copies of the signs that we use that talk about dismissal procedures, warning procedures, assembly expectations, bathroom procedures. So we pretty much laid out the foundation in terms of what we want for our students. We also have school-wide discipline, which simply means that students get a warning from the classroom teacher. Sometimes they may have to take a break, and that's in another teacher's classroom, or a timeout in their classroom. If the behavior continues to be disrupted, the teacher has the option of making a phone call home, and if necessary, a referral to the principal. The Euclid way is consistent in all of our buildings. It is just a way to, we say, give me 5, we raise our hands, our eyes are on the speaker, and our mouths are closed. This works well in staff meetings too, so we're really excited about that. We are fortunate to have counselors in our buildings. The counselors have really been an essential part. We've worked with them in the past, and they work with our students on anger management and social skills. The supports that we have in place for our students include expectation assemblies 3 times a year. Those are really important because we start those in September, we have them after the break, and we have them after the spring break. And we pretty much just review what we want for those students. We want them to really listen, learn, and achieve and follow the adult directions the first time. So there's a list of things that they need to do in order to be successful. And a very popular one is lunch with the principals. They enjoy it, especially on Pizza Day, which is Wednesday. We have a bullying box. We have it in 2 locations, one by the cafeteria, the other outside the main office. This box is really important because for that student that might be hesitant to talk about a situation in the classroom where he feels that he's being bullied, those boxes are in the hallway. They simply put a note in the box listing the name and the description of the incident, place it in the box, and we check those boxes a couple of times a day. And then we address the problems. Students of the month are selected by the classroom teacher. Those are the students that display positive behavior, good citizenship. Their picture is taken, it's put on a board outside the main office. Their names are also listed in our school newsletter. This is our suspension graph. The graph to the left indicates the number of suspensions. We have 37. The graph in the center indicates the number of students that have been suspended out of school. We have 24, and some of those students have more than 1 suspension. And then we have a total of 39 days of lost instruction for those 24 students. We're going to have Mrs. Smolik come up, and she is going to talk a little bit about the reading data. Mrs. Smolik?
Mr. Bell, I noticed that a student arrived. Did you care to present them with their certificate at this time, or?
You could.
I thought perhaps, that might.
You need a little bit more time so we can put that student in there? And
But I'm okay, but I know what it's like to be a mother and come professional.
I think it's students first, that's a great suggestion.
Yes,
So that's
that
what we'll
is.
do. No, I don't.
Aaron Hope.
Aaron, okay. Aaron, I want you to know you're very, very important to us. So we're going to stop the board meeting just for you. So I just want you to know that. But at this time, we'd like to recognize Aaron Hulk, who is one of our award winners. So Aaron, come on up and get your certificate.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job. What grade are you in?
I'm in 11th.
11th grade, okay. Good. Got another year to do it again, huh?
And make sure you shake her hand because she's the reason why you got it.
And I believe Aaron's mom is here.
Yeah.
You want to stand up and be recognized too? 'Cause you know how important the parents are behind the student achievement, so thank you.
Yes, thanks for getting that. And thanks for that suggestion. Sometimes it's good to be led, and I appreciate that. So I thought that was a great suggestion, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Do we want?
I can do that. And the other thing, before we just get into the presentation, just to the families, if you do not choose to stay, we understand that, and we're going to be doing some presentations. We'd love for you to stay if you would like, but again, if you choose not to, we understand that. We are very, very proud of your students, though. So if you decide to stay, great. If not, we understand. But again, congratulations on the achievement.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Mr. Bell. Tonight, I'm Mrs. Smolik. I'm the literacy coach at Indian Hills. I'm sorry, I used to be at Indian Hills. Now it's Bluestone. And tonight I'm going to be presenting our current reading data for our students, the goals that our teachers have selected. Well, I'm also going to be talking about the action steps that are going to be taken to help students that are below the expected norms, and how these children are being monitored. So the first piece of data or information you're going to be looking at is a graph that has been taken from our Ames Web baseline data that was given in the fall as soon as students began, and this is for kindergarten and first grade children. They were tested on their letter sound fluency, which is the sounds that letters make, and it's a good indicator of how prepared children are to begin their reading. So in looking at this data, we see that, as we should see, our first grade children are further ahead in this skill, but both the first and kindergarten children are at around 41% far below the norm or far below the expected average. So with this data in mind, teachers in kindergarten and first grade decided that their letter sound fluency has to be of primary importance at this time. So the goal for kindergarten, well, let me start with first grade. The goal for first grade is to shore up the letter sound fluency by diminishing by 20% the area of students in the red, as evidenced by our January testing, which will be taking place as soon as we get back from our break. And hopefully our first grade students will show such an increase that we will know that they are most definitely ready to begin the journey of reading. For kindergarten, they're given a little extra time, as is fitting for kindergarten students, and our goal for them is for May, or the last baseline, or the last Ames Web data assessment. For second grade, we're looking at something different. It's the same test, but it's a different probe that the children are given in the second grade. In second grade, it's expected the children, of course, are reading. And this measure is how many words a child can read successfully in a minute. So in the second grade, just over 37% of our students are secure. They measure up to our national norms. 33.7% are in the middle. They're close, and you can see that there are almost 29% of our second grade readers that are far below their level. So, as a result of this, our second grade teachers have used this as their priority. They want to decrease by 20% the number of children that appear in the red in their fluency monitoring. And this will be re-evaluated again, not only in January, but in May. That's when the goal is to reduce by 20% those children in the red. Now, the data we're looking at for our fourth grade children actually is the OAA results from last year. And as you know, we have 6 schools that have now been condensed or reconfigured, not condensed, reconfigured into 4 larger schools. The children that we have at Bluestone, who are now in 4th grade, but of course at the end of last year's testing, Their reading proficiency, 66.13% of those students were proficient or above in reading, as compared to our district average, which was around 64%. So our fourth grade students appear to be well on their way to meeting the goal that we've set for them for proficiency in reading, as based on the OAA. For fifth grade, a similar scale has been configured. Again, these children were fourth graders last year. At the end of the year, they scored 63% that were proficient or above, those children who are at Bluestone, and the district was at 74. Now, we recently received our reading data for third grade. Third grade, as you may know, is given the reading OAA test twice a year. The very first test is given in October, and that is actually the very beginning of the year for them. So we are looking at children who just recently were in second grade. So if you look at the percentage, it doesn't look very promising at this point, the point of October. However, the children have the entire year to show significant improvement, and it's very doable. This year, our students in the third grade in their first OAA tests are at a 26% proficient or above. 2 years ago at Indian Hills, we had a third grade class that scored 11%. And by the end of the year, the proficient or above was at 67%. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is to show you that it's absolutely doable. So we have high hopes and high expectations for students and teachers. Our reading goal, therefore, is that 75% of our third, fourth, and fifth grade students at Bluestone will pass the Ohio Achievement Assessment in reading by the spring of this coming year. How are we going to do this? Well, we have several new action steps. Because of a reconfiguring and restaffing of all of our schools, there is a new intervention team. We have a total of 8 tutors at each school. School improvement and reading intervention tutors total 6, and then our additional classroom assistants in kindergarten and first grade is another 2 teachers, or classroom support. So that's a total of 8. Also, what we've implemented with our scheduling that is common to all the schools, every teacher has built into her day a half hour that's called intervention or flexible enrichment time. And what we are going to do with our students during that time, or what we have been doing, is those children who need remediation in a particular skill, as evidenced by an assessment, or a child that needs to be challenged even further, this half-hour time is built in, and it allows teachers to have these children grouped in flexible groupings as according to their needs. And the last new thing that we've added this year is we've incorporated a program called the Daily 5, which is a procedure that structures independent reading and writing time in the kindergarten through second grade. So it's a way where children have academic choice with guidance from their teacher, with very specific lessons in mind. Ongoing, that is things that we have done in the past that we will continue to do because they have proven to be beneficial, is classroom teachers use targeted weekly Common Core skills and concepts to bring up in their weekly collaboration for discussion. We have professional development, as you know, that is provided 4 times a year for all of our teachers. Additional monthly professional development is also provided by, at Bluestone, by the math and the reading coach. And some of the things that we already have covered are further examination of how the Daily 5 is going, planning with classroom teachers, looking at higher level questioning in order to address our Common Core requirements. And finally, our most recent one, we are planning an author's tea to really celebrate the children's writing process and progress. The literacy coach, as in the past, plans and models lessons with our classroom teachers, and we have weekly grade level collaborations with all teachers. Our interventions are 3 different kinds. We have 5 days a week, some of our children who are below grade level performance receive additional 40-minute interventions using leveled books with specific skill-centered lessons, where also reading and writing are incorporated in these lessons, and they are provided by skilled, in most cases, they are licensed teachers who offer this service. The Pearson Toolkit also is a program that is a little more elemental, and its instruction is based more on phonics. And for our earliest intervention, that is those kindergartners who may not be quite secure in their alphabet, upper and lower case recognition or letter sounds, there is another program that's provided for them. This is what our monitoring looks like. Once the children have been receiving these interventions, they are monitored weekly. And this is the progress that we've made at Bluestone. As you can see, mid to upper 70s has been a consistent graph. You know, our green bars show children that are above each week, and the yellow is nearly meeting their goal, and then, of course, the red, those children are still below level, significant enough to require that we take a closer look, which we will do after our next assessment of Ames Web. When we look at that data, then we will decide if those children in the red are going to continue with the program they're in, or we may select one of the other interventions that we would feel would better suit their needs. But our children are progressing to a nice percentage of them are. This is what happens at our weekly collaborations. This is an example of a 4th grade test. We targeted cause and effect because that was the skill that they were teaching most concentratedly during that week. These 3 questions were then addressed, and teachers put the total numbers that were correct out of the children who got that particular number correct compared to the rest of their class. So you can see that these percentages offer a lot of discussion points for teachers. There are 4 teachers. Some of their results were significantly higher than others. So this opens up some very good professional conversation in which teachers will share their strategies and try to deliver perhaps a better idea or a better understanding of how to deliver and reteach the lesson that perhaps their children need to be retaught in. Okay, I'm sorry. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Zuzik, our math coach.
Madam President, Mr. Superintendent, and Mr. Treasurer, members of the board, good evening. I'm going to be speaking to you tonight about our plan at Bluestone for student achievement in the area of mathematics. I'd like to start by sharing our goals with you. Our Ames Web data for our primary grades for 1st and 2nd grade, we had 27% of our students and 1st grade students and 33% of our 2nd grade students scored in the targeted area in the average range or above as compared with national norms on the math computation test. This is testing how fast and accurate our students at this grade level can add and subtract. Based upon this data, we want to increase that green or grow the green, and so we wrote the following goal. We'd like to reduce the number of students in the red by 20% by May of 2013. For our grades 3 through 5, we used our data from our Ohio Achievement Assessments last spring. Our current 4th grade students, we have 61% of those students who are proficient or above, and 60% of our current 5th grade students were scored 60% proficient or above in the spring. And based upon that data, we set a goal that we would like 75% of our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students to pass the Ohio Achievement Assessment in math in the spring. How will we do this? These are some of the action steps that we are implementing. These are some new action steps that we have put into place this year that none of us have previously used at our buildings. First, we are following the district plan that for our kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers, they have implemented the Common Core state standards for mathematics. The state of Ohio is approaching a transition. By the year 2014-15, all of the state of Ohio will be using the Common Core standards versus the Ohio Academic Content Standards. Our grades 3 through 5 are preparing for implementation of the Common Core standards for next school year. The teachers have built into their schedule intervention and enrichment time that Mrs. Smolik mentioned also, during which teachers have no new instruction, but instead can reteach students or provide enrichment for those students who are either struggling or with math concepts or who have mastered and need enrichment. So this is something new that teachers are using that time for math instruction for students who need it. And prior to this year, our buildings did not have a full-time math coach. But at the beginning this year, I am at the building full-time, so I'm able to provide more model lessons and work with teachers and provide embedded professional development. Some ongoing math action steps that we've found to be successful are our weekly grade level collaboration meetings. We also know that computational fluency, and by that I mean how fast and accurate students can compute or calculate using addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. We know that this is an indicator, if students can do this fluently, that they will be able to master math concepts. So in order to increase in that area, teachers are providing daily math fact practice. We are continuing to use an online program called First in Math that students can practice math facts and also receive immediate feedback. And our teachers are also implementing number talks, which it's a short period of the day. A lot of teachers begin their math lessons with this 5 to 10 minute conversation about numbers, during which a problem is presented and students not only solve the problem, but they share their strategies of how they solved the problem, and they must defend their thinking using mathematical reasoning. All of our teachers are using Everyday Math as a program to support their instruction, and with this program comes games that support the math concepts being taught, and so our teachers are playing those games at least weekly. And finally, I am providing an additional hour of professional development at Bluestone in addition to the district professional development sessions. For students who are struggling with math, I am currently working with 12 students following a program called Do the Math. It is recently purchased by our district. We are also in the process of planning lunchtime math clubs to help struggling students. And again, that half hour of time during which the IE time, intervention enrichment time, during that time, the classroom teacher can provide interventions for strugglers who need it. And this is very beneficial because the teacher has the power to connect back to the lesson taught that day, so that's very effective. Some examples of how we are monitoring our student progress in math. We are administering a baseline, mid-year, and final assessment, and this allows us to measure growth. Our kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers are using monthly pre-test and post-tests that were developed last year where cohorts of teachers came together and developed the assessments that align with the Common Core. And our 3 through 5 teachers use common formative assessments as well. All of our teachers are using exit slips to check on to check for student understanding. So after a lesson or two have been taught on a particular math concept, teachers give an exit slip to check for student understanding, and then they bring those results to collaboration where we can analyze them and discuss if certain strategies were effective or not. And again, it also identifies students who need to have that misconception cleared up before further instruction is given. And finally, we use our Ames Web for the math computation test 3 times a year in the fall, winter, and spring. This is an example of what our monitoring looks like for the 12 students that I've just finished giving the program, when they come back from break, they will actually begin a new intervention, but this shows the progress that most of the students did respond very nicely. And of the 4 that did not reach their goal in AIMSweb, at least 3 out of those 4 kids did pass their post-test in the intervention kit that I was working with. So they did master the concepts in that particular kit, and they'll move on to another one, and we just have to work on fluency. And lastly, I'd like to share this example of you to illustrate how we are using our teacher-based teams or our collaboration time. This is an example of our first grade teachers are working on one of the standards in the Common Core for first grade is that first graders need to be able to make a group of 10 from a set of 70 objects. And at the beginning of November, the blue shows the pre-test data. Our students were really struggling with being able to do this, and as it's the beginning of the year, and this is a concept that should be mastered by the end of the year. In fact, Teacher 1 didn't have any students who were able to do this. Well, the teachers at Collaboration discussed strategies, and I actually went into the classroom of teacher number 1, and we worked hard, and by the end of the month, we had significant growth. And again, we have until the end of the year to get 100% mastery. So we will continue to work on this, continue to give multiple experiences to the children, and discuss strategies that we can help do that more efficiently. And we expect to have 100% of our students be able to do this by the end of the year. And now I would like to turn our presentation back over to our principal, Mrs. Linda Knight, who has some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mrs. Zuzak. In closing, the climate action steps that we're going to use require that the teachers use logical consequences. Do this one. Logical consequences. Back this up. There we go. Logical consequences to reduce the number of classroom referrals. We will make home visits to reduce the number of suspensions out of school. We find that that's really going to make a difference, at least we're hoping. In reading, we have tutors and classroom assistants that will provide the additional support that our students need. In the area of math, we have pre- and post-test in grades K through 2, and we have an exit slip, and you have a copy in your packet for students in grades 3 through 5 to help monitor their progress. We feel that this is going to be the formula for success for Bluestone and its students. And we're excited about the challenge, and we know we're going to do this. We also know that we need to engage our families because they are the key to our students being successful. So you heard Mrs. Smolik talk about our kids writing. We are really excited about that because our students are writing really well. So we're going to offer new this year our students' first writing conference where students will get a chance to showcase their writing. There will be a series of evening writing conferences for parents. We will also provide parents with a Make It, Take It math workshop. We play a lot of games at school, and we want our parents to make those games and play those games with their students at home. We'll have the Living Wax Museum, and that's an opportunity for students to research a character and then pose as that character in our wax museum. It's a lot of fun, and it's really engaging. And finally, I think many of you are familiar with the Local Heroes program. That is an opportunity for the students to write about a person that's special in their life. There's a rubric that we use to grade that essay. Those parents or family members that are selected as a hero will be presented with a certificate and a prize bag at the Local Heroes program, which is already scheduled for February 28th. Madam President, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Treasurer, members of the board, that concludes our presentation, and we would be happy to entertain your questions. Thank you.
Does the board have any questions? Margot? Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
I was just going to compliment the Bluestone staff on an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
What's your feeling on the integration of the Common Core standards? Meaning, I mean, do you feel like, and again, these are requirements that we need to be fully fully integrated into our classroom instruction for the 2014-2015 school year, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
How, from a percentage basis, how close are we to being 100% in right now? Do you have any idea?
Well, for math, the kindergarten through second grade teachers across the district are implementing the Common Core this year. And our in-service days we are using to have the teachers in grades 3 through 5 really dive deep into those standards and in preparation for understanding them and they will be teaching to the Common Core next year in math.
And in reading, actually, this is the first year that we have really delved deeply into it. So it is the task of the reading coaches to enlighten all teachers, grades kindergarten through 5, is to the depth and breadth of the Common Core. Now, within our reading program, we do have an addendum that has been added to the program that really highlights the Common Core that is already embedded in what we are teaching. So to refine that and to extend the type of questioning that should be included in instruction is something that we are going to spend a good deal of time on this year developing.
Yeah, let me add some, Mr. Smith, members of the board. I know Mr. Lysick is going to get into some detail, and I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but one of the things that occurs with Common Core that's different and why we have to really get on this early is because in the old Ohio achievement standards, we were teaching a lot of things not very well, not very deep, because we had so many things, so many standards to teach. And with Common Core, what will occur is that there will be fewer standards, the depth increases. So what we're trying to do is get the level of understanding to be a lot deeper. It's a different kind of understanding for our children to be able to understand, and again, Mr. Lysick is going to go into some detail about this, but how to be able to analyze and be able to provide some feedback in a different way than what they've been able to do now, where they just look at the answer, get the answer, and then read it. They're going to have to be able to define and be able to communicate and articulate how they got that answer and be able to use that for other areas, which is a little bit different. And that's the reason why, when you look at tonight's presentation, the importance of the reading and the math. If they can't read, then it makes it very difficult to do anything else. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're able to do that. The other thing that I just want to add, and I'm done with this, is just the fact that when you looked at the reading scores and you looked at where we were in the green and the red and all of that, understand that this is the reason why the preschool piece is so important to us. The early childhood is so important to us because what is happening is that students come in behind, and we have to get, and again, Mr. Lysick is going to do some of this in the next presentation, but kids come in behind. Therefore, you have to get more than a year's worth of growth in a year. And so in a lot of cases, we may get a year's worth, it's not enough. And in some cases, 2 years isn't enough. So we're trying to be able to fill a gap based off of some areas that were out of our control, but we're trying to get our kids up to speed. So all of what you saw tonight is an opportunity for us to look at how we do some things differently. And I thought ladies did a great job of being able to explain that and really get into some detail about how we're doing it. And that's part of that, just as you look at that whole Common Core agenda that we have, we're just trying to get ready a lot earlier.
Madam President, if I might, then that leads me, that's a perfect segue for my question. I was looking at the third grade, or the second grade reading data, Mrs. Smolik, and you said that the goal, the second grade reading goal was to reduce the students in the red by 20% by May of 2013. Which means that that number of 28 is going to be reduced to 22.96 or 23% or still by the end of May, not reading at the level that they need to be at, correct? I mean, that'll bump your yellow and your green to 77%, which is great, but that still leaves 23% of our second grade students in the red by the end of their academic second grade school year.
Yeah.
Now, how does that translate for our third grade reading guarantee? So are these children going to be promoted to the third grade?
You know, it's definitely a serious concern, not only for Bluestone, but for all the children in all the schools in Euclid. But we feel that with the supports that are in place right now and the number of tutors that we have that are addressing just exactly that, the problem that we have, that we should see significant growth. Can I promise that all children will be there? No, I can't.
Impossible.
Because some of these children probably we are more than 2 years below.
And I
you
can-
know.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr.
Well, I can help you too, because I think I understand exactly your question, and Mrs. Light, members of the board, our goal is 100%.
It should be.
So that's the goal. And so what you saw here was a minimum that we wanted to get to, at least to get to this. And when you look at the numbers are really based off of the state indicators. Right now, the state indicator is 75%. If we were able to reduce it 20%, then we're able to get above the state average. So that's the minimum. But, obviously, we want to get all of our students there. So we're just looking at a minimum of trying to get them to that
And that's
point.
what I did. I even wrote a little note to myself, is that you said you're going to review your data, your Ames Web data in January. And I would be surprised. I think that, I have every confidence in Mr. Lysick and what he's done with our Title I this year, that I even suspect that your numbers are going to be pretty impressive by January. Will you then maybe adjust your goal
Well,
to
that's
maybe
a
reduce by
possibility.
red by 24% or 23%, or maybe even 30%?
That would be wonderful. I mean, I'm hoping, I'm very anxious to get the results of that test. And, see, perhaps we will.
Right.
And I think what you're saying is, for me as a superintendent, as we try to drive all of this, is a sense of urgency throughout the entire district. We understand the importance of that, because we can't we're not able to do some of the other things if we're not able to get our kids to the reading level that they need to be. And it's very important, and again, we're going to talk about this, but it's very important that we understand if they're not on track early enough, that we can do some things to prevent that. That's the key to all this identification, early identification. I know Mr. Lysick is going to talk about this and all that, but I have to. It's just so important that we have that, the early intervention,
And
being able to do that.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think the reading weekly target data that you presented, I think that's exactly how you do it. I think that is how you increase every child's chances in our district, especially at that critical second grade level, to make sure that they're reading on target.
Yes.
At least, end of May, and that they're on target for the beginning of third grade, so that they can continue their progress all the way through the end. So, yeah, I think this is great. Thank you.
Any questions down here?
No, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I did have a question on the reading, especially for kindergarten and I guess it'd carry over to first grade, but do you find that the Ames Web is reflective of the crawl data that you get at the beginning of the year?
Well, Mrs. Yo, who is our kindergarten teacher, do you feel that they are comparable? I think that the crawl is a little more extensive. The crawl,
Julian, why don't you come to the podium so we can see your face?
The crawl is more extensive, and the differing pieces is that one is a fluency, so one is a timed. The crawl is just given one-on-one with the child. There is no time factor in it. So what we've done, we took the data from the crawl, and then we took our data from our Ames Web, and we had to first get the children to identify their letters, just identify them. We want them to get there fluently, but they need to know the letter first before they can know it quickly. So I think the comparison, it's challenging. I don't think that that crawl piece, I wish it was more extensive, and I've heard there's things in the works to add more components to it. But comparing a piece that's not timed to a timed piece, it's challenging to get a true definite of where they are. That's why we continue to do both pieces. We're monitoring them bi-weekly and getting to see where they're at, which we're at 89% of letter identification right now. We're really proud of our teams working hard. And then we're going to go into that sound. And we're teaching the sound fluency, but we want to make sure they can identify the letters first.
Would you let the public know what CRAWL stands for?
The CRAWL is the Kindergarten Readiness Assessment/Literacy.
Thank you.
And the crawl is given to the students when they're first starting kindergarten.
Correct.
So that's demonstrating what is expected that they should know when they come to you in
Correct.
kindergarten.
Yes.
And that's where Mr. Bell is saying that we have so many students that are behind right off the bat because they can't pass the crawl test.
That's correct, we do.
And that's probably, when I first came to the district, it was the first data set that I looked at. Because it was indicative to me of preparedness, but it also would then indicate to me, when you look at the other grade levels, where we may be falling behind, because if they are behind when they start, then what happens is every teacher is now playing catch-up all the way through. So that's the piece that we're trying to really get tight around so that we can really get kids in a position to be successful, and teachers.
I think one of the things that we still have to get out to the public is that there are certain skills that the students need to come to us with. I think that there is still an attitude that, well, they'll learn it in school, that, I just have to get them to school, and once they get to school, they'll get all this, not realizing that they needed a lot of training prior to coming to us. They need to be able to sit down and listen to a story and identify their letters and be able to print their first name. Even if it's not exactly the way we want them to print it, at least if they can get something down, that's helpful. But I do remember struggling with students with those skills. Let me see, wait a minute. On the reading for the kindergarten level, does the state still expect them, I don't know if with Common Core, if it changed the idea that they would be reading by the end of kindergarten?
What we've used to assess the reading for kindergarten is a DRA, a diagnostic reading assessment, and the hopes is that they would be at an independent level 3, which is a developing 4 by the time that they were in first grade. So that's been our goal up until now.
Okay, and that's something also the public needs to know, because I think the assumption is they'll start, because back in the olden days, we didn't learn to read till first grade. And so I think there's still too many people that have that attitude that they'll read in first grade, not realizing that we need them to be reading in kindergarten.
Exactly.
And we need them to be knowing some number sense and simple calculations at that early age. People have asked me, how can you teach math differently? And that's one of the questions I'm going to ask the math coach, is because they want to know all the talk on Common Core and everything else, and they're not understanding, 2 plus 2 still comes out to being 4, and they're like, how can you teach math differently? It's the same math that we had, but it's not really.
Well, I think the difference is that students are expected to be able to explain the reasoning behind things, whereas I know when I went to school, I didn't have to do that, and it was a lot of rote memorization of the procedure. How do you add 2-digit numbers? Well, we start in the ones column and you carry the 1, but you need to be able to explain now, what do you mean carry the 1? What does that mean? Oh, I'm making a new group of 10. So I think that's where the main difference lies, that they have to explain and support their thinking.
How do they test for that? I can understand how in math you can test for the skill of adding the numbers, but how do you test for the explanation?
On the OAA, it will say either draw a picture or use numbers or words to explain how you arrived at your answer. And so it'll be maybe a 2-point question where they will get 1 point for the correct answer, but then another point for explaining. So there are cases when the child makes a mistake in their calculation, doesn't get the right answer, maybe they're a number or 2 off, but they'll get the point for explaining that they got it right. And sometimes vice versa. They'll be able to put the answer down, but they won't know how to explain, and they won't get that second point.
And I think that's the part that parents need to understand, to ask students, how did you get to that answer?
Absolutely.
Because that's the questions that are going to be asked, and that's something that I think people aren't used to asking. Teachers aren't, and now parents aren't either.
Right,
So,
using pictures, numbers, and words.
right. I know I had another question. When does the 3rd grade guarantee kick in? Which year? I forgot. Is it 14, 13, 14?
Next year.
Next year. So that means that our 2nd graders would have to pass the 3rd grade guarantee next year. Okay. And we're still a little ways away for some of those students. So, okay, I did have a question on the math. I gotta get to the right page. Yeah, it's lots of pages to look at. When you were talking about the progress of the students that were the 12 students that you were working with, so all the yellows got to green from your explanation, but we're still dealing with the same, is the 33% still the same 33% students, it's the same ones?
Yes.
Now, do you keep the same 12 all year, or is this an in and out pattern?
Well, all of the students, except of the 12, 11 of them did pass their post-test. The module or the intervention kit that I was using is below their grade level material. So in other words, I was using an addition kit for, 4th or 5th graders, and the next kit would move on to addition with larger numbers. So they will continue on using the kit.
So those same 12 will be the ones that will be working with you all year?
As of right now, and the one that's still really struggling, I'm in the process of meeting, I'll be meeting with the teacher and discussing some other things we can do for that child, something different.
I think that people need to be aware that we do a lot of different strategies with the students, and that's part of the difference that a district like ours, we need those resources. We need to be able to have the tutors and the extra interventions because we have students that start out so far behind in the first place. And the only last one was for Mrs. Knight, and I just love your logical consequences. Because that's what I did with my kids and my own students, well, not my students, my own children. And people used to wonder when I made them jump up and down outside on the concrete 10 times for, jumping in the house when they weren't supposed to. It does work. It does. And if they go up and down the stairs 10 times without stomping, they learn real quick not to stomp. So I didn't have a name for it, so logical consequences. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good job.
Yes.
Thank you. With every presentation, what you try to do is to set the table, and then you bring in the dessert. So tonight I have Mr. Lysak, who is the dessert for the presentation. Because what he's going to do is he's going to connect what you heard from Bluestone and give you the district perspective of what we're doing and how this all connects, and some of the similar themes that we have already talked about, the Common Core, some of the early intervention and some of those kinds of things. He's going to shed a little bit of light on some specifics as to how we are, as a district now, paying attention to some of those strategies and being able to support teachers in the classroom so that they can do what they need to do. And so at this time, I want to turn the presentation over, Madam Chair, members of the board, to Ted Lysak, who is our Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Mr. Lysak.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Bell, thank you for this opportunity to provide you with the dessert for the evening. Hopefully you'll find it very palatable. We are here to talk about curriculum and instruction, and I will say and thank the Bluestone staff. They did set the table very, very nicely for what we are going to be talking about this evening. Before I get started, I did want to introduce two of our team members in the Academic Services and Curriculum Instruction Department, specifically Mr. Tom Hanachek. He's the Coordinator of Assessment and School Improvement, and Mr. Ken Ferlito, who is the Coordinator of our Federal Grants Program. So without their work, a lot of this would not get done. So I really wanted to publicly thank them. They have done a yeoman's job so far this year in really putting some structures in place for the kids in this district, in this community. So thank you, gentlemen. Tonight we're going to talk about three simple things: curriculum and instruction, student supports, and technology. But before we jump into those three things, I think it's really critical for the board and the community to understand how things are different this year. And I was trying to think of a research-based strategy that we could use to share with you, and I decided to go with a non-linguistic representation. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So I'm going to explain it to you like this. It's a picture of a pinball machine. And essentially, if you think about how our department serviced our students last year, there were a lot of parts, just like this pinball machine. A lot of interactive things that were going on in our classrooms, lots of technologies, lots of engaging lessons, lots of different curriculum materials, and they were all going on out there in the classrooms at all of our buildings, K-12. And if you think about our department, we were these little things down here at the bottom, the paddles. The students were the balls. And the students would come to our buildings, and we would interact with them in a myriad of ways. Like I said, the technology, lots of things would go on. And our department would act like those paddles, and we would try to react as best we could to address students who those activities didn't work for and they started to fall. So we would do our best to throw them back into the mix and support them. So that's how we worked last year. Early on, we realized this wasn't working for us. So under new leadership, we're working very differently now, very, very differently. And I have another non-linguistic representation. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this is worth more than 1,000. It's a brief video on how I think we currently work. So what you'll see, strategies are put in place that are very strategic. Sometimes they may seem unorthodox. But they're always working towards a goal. And one action leads to another action. And if you think about one of these things not working, the system breaks down and you know right away. Very purposeful. This is my favorite part here. So, how are things different? We're very strategic now. Unlike the pinball machine, we put things in place out in all of our buildings. And we monitor those things very, very closely, so we're not reacting just when kiddos fall through the cracks. We monitor all of those strategies so that we can know early whether or not those strategies are working. And if they're not working, we can respond early and change those strategies midstream rather than just waiting and crossing our fingers till the end of the year and saying we hope we pass the test. Mr. Bell has said quite a few times, hope is not a strategy, and we do not use hope as a strategy. We do try to monitor those things, respond early, and most importantly, beginning with the end in mind. And the end for us is increased student achievement. So that's really, I think, a visual to set the stage in how things diagram. It looks like this. At the middle it says core instruction. What we realized very early was that we had a lot of different definitions for what good instruction looked like in this district. And we realized quickly that if we were going to move forward systemically, we couldn't do that with pockets of excellence. So we had to come to a common understanding about what made Euclid's instruction. What was good instruction? So we spent an entire year talking with all of the teachers at the buildings, all of the principals, curriculum council. We had some parents that we talked about to define what makes good instruction good instruction. And in all of these conversations, these 5 threads that you see in front of you came out, is that good instruction, and I want to frame it in this way, these are elements that you would see in a preschool classroom, you should expect to see in a preschool classroom or a high school advanced placement physics classroom. It's irrelevant. When you're talking about learning and solid opportunities for students to learn, this is what it looks like. And that's language rich. It's engagement of the students. It's data-driven and research-based. And it's a mixture of whole group and small group. Not specifically one or the other, but a good mixture of those things. So once we define that, we realized that we had to put that into a really clear context for teachers. And the next sheet that you'll see, at the top, it's titled Euclid City Schools Instructional Framework. And essentially, this is the menu of strategies that our teachers choose from in implementing. And at its most basic level, it starts with a clear learning objective, so that the students and the teacher are both on the same page for what the expectation is. There's a clear opening that's given that hooks the students, captures their attention as you're introducing new knowledge to them. And then there's some time that we call a work session for all students to interact with this new content. And then you wrap it up with a closing to check for understanding, see where the students are at, see where you would need to start your lesson the following day. Seems very simple, but we had lots of different interpretations of what this was like. So once we put those in place, we were able to move on to our data forms. And this is something that's really exciting, and this is why. Starts with the students. All starts with the students. And increasing student achievement using these forms allows us to do something really unique that we hadn't been able to do before. And that's allow teacher teams to get together, and this could be grade level teams or at the secondary level subject area teams. They get together and they administer these assessments like the Bluestone staff stated in their presentation. Maybe a weekly assessment, maybe an exit slip in mathematics, and they look as a team at how their students did collectively on these assessments. And they talk about how they can divide these students up during that intervention or enrichment time to meet their needs, enrich the students who need enriching, intervene with those who need intervention. This goes one step further, though, where school teams use those same forms to determine how they can support all of the teacher teams at their buildings. So the school teams are looking at student data, filtering their forms up to the school team. The school team then has their finger on the pulse of how each grade level is doing. And they can support those grade levels differentiated, if you think of it as a large classroom, providing support for their teachers. And then we get to the final level where those school teams are submitting their academic, climate, instructional data up to the district team. And here we're able to see where the individual schools need different supports. It's not a one-size-fits-all. This structure here that starts with the students and works its way all the way up to the district level allows us to really differentiate the needs not only for our students, but our teacher teams, our school leadership teams, district-wide. So that all started with common language, and we were able to monitor that and support it through those data forms that we talked about. Now, Common Core. Common Core is focused on preparing all students for college and career readiness. So it's making sure that they are ready for those colleges or career paths, and it starts with increased expectations. You hear a lot about ramping up for the Common Core. Those increased expectations will be measured by new assessments that come in 2014. They will be technology-based assessments. Students will be taking their assessments on technology and be able to have immediate feedback when those are given. Like Mr. Bell alluded to, there are fewer topics, so the teachers are finding that they can go much deeper. It was really interesting last year when we had the K-2 teachers out in their cohorts. The first thing that they did was mapped out their school year and said, okay, here's where we need to be. They started in May. Here's where we need to end up, and then they worked backwards. Their first stab, they said, well, we'd be done in January. And we said, oh, that's how deep you can go. You know, the topics have become so much fewer, you can really spread it out and go at a much deeper level. The Common Core standards are in English, language arts, and math, but through the literacy standards in all subject areas, history, science, other technical areas, there's a call for students to do more writing from fact, not feeling, and reading more nonfiction in all subject areas. So this has tremendous impact across all subject areas. Like Bluestone so eloquently said, I was very proud of them that K-2 is currently implementing the Common Core standards now. And since the beginning of the year, we've been bringing teams of teachers together to map out implementation for grades 3 through 12 next year. As you know, we do not have to implement this until 2014. But we want to be ahead of the curve. We cannot wait until then. We have to make sure that we're ahead of this so that when 2014 comes, it's not a learning year for us. That we're out ahead of it and we can really work through the kinks prior to getting there. So that is where we were at with the Common Core. Now instruction. One exciting thing we do in Euclid, very powerful, are instructional walkthroughs. All of our principals, central office administrators included, conduct 3-minute walkthroughs. We gather data on what type of instruction is going on in the classroom. And you may question, 3 minutes, is that a large enough time to get an accurate picture of what's going on in a classroom? 3 minutes is not, but 3,327 times 3 minutes is a pretty accurate picture of what's going on in our classrooms. Last year, we conducted just under 1,800 to this point. Currently this year, we've really upped the expectation, and everyone is delivering. We are currently at almost 3,400 today. So Administrators are really being viewed as the instructional leaders in their buildings, are getting into more classrooms. Some of the data we're collecting, we look at whether or not research-based strategies are being used, those strategies that have been identified as having the highest probability of increasing student achievement. Last year, we were seeing research-based strategies at 91.7 of our walkthroughs, this year 92.8. In preparation for the Common Core, we referenced before that students will be forced and expected to think on much deeper levels. We're not just looking for students to remember and understand, very low level. We have to ramp it up and look at things like allowing our students to apply, analyze, and evaluate, because that matches the new assessments. Last year, we were at 31% of the classrooms we visited were leveraging activities for students that match those types of learning modalities, and this year we're at 33. Small group, pair, and individual type lessons are monitors as well. Last year we were at 25.6, this year we're at 26.4, small increase. I put this graph up here, or this table up here, not to show you that we're making increases. The first 4 rows of this really just tell us about what we know, and it's useless. It's useless to do nothing with this. The last piece is the most important, and that's what we're doing with what we know. Now that we've collected and we have an accurate picture of our instruction, we're taking action. We're doing something with that data. We're changing our practice. So what we've decided to do is that we met as principals and as an administrative leadership team and decided that we're not seeing the increases that we should be seeing. So what do we need to change to have a different outcome? So we looked at how are we closing that feedback loop with teachers? We can walk in, but if we give teachers very general feedback, it's not specific about instruction, that's difficult to do that. So up until now, our feedback has been very general. We would give the math department, for instance, all of the math walkthroughs and say, this is what we're seeing. It doesn't really mean much to an individual teacher. And it was untimely. We would look at it about 3 times a year. What we're doing starting January 2nd is we've built 2 pieces into our walkthrough form. One is a praise phrase that we can select, something that reinforces good instruction from our instructional framework and core instruction. And the second one is a reflective question that asks questions like, fantastic lesson. Have you thought of ways that you could increase the level of thinking with all of your students around this lesson? And as soon as the walkthrough is done, that walkthrough will be emailed directly to the teacher so that the teacher can have direct feedback and spark some really good instructional conversations. So we're not pleased with those minimal increases we're seeing. It's progress, but there's a sense of urgency for us. With what's ahead of us with Common Core, we need to move very, very quickly, and we're taking action early to move quickly. So that's instruction. Now our student supports, probably one of the most exciting things we'll talk about this evening. As you know, last year, we did a tremendous restructure of our title dollars. And our title dollars are federal monies that come to our district and it's based on our poverty rate. This is just as much about fiscal responsibility as it is about student achievement. And essentially what I'm saying is we're stretching every dollar that we get to get the most bang out of our buck to impact students. So what you can see here is last year we served grades K through 5. This year we've expanded to K through 8. Last year we served 263 students. This year, 609. We've increased both our full-time and part-time employees that are serving as tutors, and we were able to do that at a substantially lower number financially because of some creative ways that we were able to bring in hourly tutors versus full-time teachers. And we're seeing some fantastic results. Last year, we provided interventions in only reading. This year, we've expanded to reading and mathematics. Last year, we monitored 3 times a year, beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. Currently, any student who's receiving interventions is monitored on a weekly basis. As Bluestone pulled those numbers up, it's really great to see, and you'll see many of those graphs reflected here. So how are we doing? Let's take a look. In math, I want to make it very clear, these graphs reflect the number of only reflect the students who are receiving interventions, okay? So these are only graphs for students who are receiving interventions, and you can see that the green indicates whether they've achieved or exceeded their goal. And the goal that we set for our students, Mr. Bell and the board alluded to the fact that our students come in behind, and oftentimes we have to grow them at twice the rate. The goal that we set for every student who comes into our intervention is to grow at 2 times the rate of their peers who are not in their intervention. So when you look at that graph and you see achieved or exceeded the goal, these are students who are not only growing, they're growing at a rate 2 times faster than their peers who are in the classroom not receiving the intervention. So very, very important. In fact, there are instances that we've looked at on our Ames Web graphs where you can identify a student in the red, and the student in the red is growing at 1.5 times the rate of their peers. So it's deceiving to look at them as in the red because they are making growth. They're making more growth than their peers, but we've set a very high bar for the students in our intervention. And that's how they're doing in math. Very, very impressive. When you look at reading, same goal, 2 times the rate of growth, rate of improvement. Across the board, you can see that our students are responding to the interventions that are out there. We monitor on a weekly basis, so what we know is how students are responding, and what we're doing is intensifying interventions for students who may not be responding at the rate we need them to, or moving students who exceed. We're coming up to a benchmarking period where we'll be moving students out who have met criteria that we've set, again, a very high bar, but moving students out so that we can free up some space for other students to come in who may need it. Because we still do have students who are out there that need supports, but may not be at that lowest level yet to be able to fall into the supports. So that's our reading intervention data. So what's different? Well, this year, instead of starting our tutors 3 or 4 weeks into the school year, we started them 2 weeks prior to students coming in. And we provided them with training and tools on how they could support not only students, but how they could support classroom teachers in administering assessments. So we knew more about our students earlier because of the work of these tutors and deploying these tutors, not just hiring some great people and putting them out in the buildings and saying, do your best. We armed them with tools. We put structures in place so that they could go out into the buildings and support all students. We monitor the interventions, as you saw from the graphs, and it's not just monitoring for student growth. We were very intentional this year about monitoring the fidelity of the program being delivered. I'll give you an example here. We see a student who's not really responding to a reading intervention. And as we start to look at the data around fidelity, we realize that, gosh, this student, out of the last 10 Mondays, has only shown up for 4. Well, it's not the intervention that's not working. We need to reach out to the parent and make sure the parent and the family knows that it's really, really important for you to be here. So we're looking at a lot of different areas and data to pull them in so that we can respond to those to have the most impact on our students. That training we did for our tutors was not a one-time shot in the arm. We continue to bring them out. Each month, Mr. Ferlito meets with them, provides professional development opportunities to keep them fresh, arm them with new strategies and tools, refresh the ideas of just to keep the training as sharp as possible so we don't have any implementation drop-off. Further, this is really about supports for all students this year, not just those who need intervention. The research shows that those students at the highest level are the ones that grow the least in most instances. So we've instituted this intervention and enrichment time that you'll hear all of the elementary buildings, and actually the elementary and the high school, and we're currently looking at how we can leverage a creative schedule to work this into the middle schools as well. But that's enrichment time for all students so that we can meet the needs of students who are behind, but also enrich and push those students who are already at proficient to beyond proficient. I have an example here of how we're monitoring all students, not just the intervention students. When we received our data back in mid to late November, we have our October OAA results, and I'll restate here that these passage rates that you see on the left are the percentage of students in 3rd grade who passed a test that is an end of the third grade test. So this is what they're expected to know at the end of third grade. And you can see, our results were about where they were in years past. What we're doing differently this year is we met with our principals, they then met with their teams, and we've decided to track on a weekly basis how all students, are responding to the weekly test targets that Bluestone mentioned. And all buildings at the elementaries are doing this for third grade students. The fantastic thing about this is that the state expectation is 75%. Our expectation is to exceed that. District-wide, our expectation is 78%. What's even better is we will know before, because we're monitoring every single week, and we'll have an idea of where we're progressing towards that target of 78. And you can already see on the left, if you see the Arbor number at 21.5, on their last test that they reported just this last week, they're at 69% projected. And we'll know every week how students are progressing towards that. So we'll be able to ask questions about what interventions are being done for those 31% of students who didn't get it. What are we doing, and how will we know if that's having an impact? So weekly monitoring, very important. And finally, technology. I hate to put this last because it's near and dear to my heart, but very exciting. And this is, technology really means nothing until we can leverage it to change instruction. It's not just, I've often referred to technology. I know Mrs. Van Ho was on a trip with us last week, and we referred to technology as a magnifying glass. It will make good instruction look fantastic, but it will also make poor instruction look even poorer. So it's all about how the classroom teacher is using it. Some things we've been able to do is we've been able to put whiteboards, interactive whiteboards in every K-5 classroom. That actually allowed us to free up the previous whiteboards that were in the elementary buildings and move those to our secondary buildings. So we're able to expand access, and that provides visual learning opportunities for many of our students and interactive opportunities. The sale of our teacher laptops allowed us to purchase 400 iPads. They arrived last week. It was like Christmas down in our department. 400 iPads that we're currently configuring to send out to the elementary schools to use in their classrooms. So very, very exciting learning device to engage students in higher level thinking. We currently have an exploratory team put together. We took a trip to Defiance High School last week to look at a device for every high school student as a pilot and measure the impact that has on student achievement. And then all intentions would be, once we have a proof positive, to move that down to other grades as well. And all of these technology efforts are preparing our students. The more we can provide them access to technology, better positions them to perform well on the next generation assessments that'll be here in 2014. So those are our technology efforts towards increasing student achievement through student access. So in summary, I like to think of this as looking in the rearview mirror, where we were. We found out we needed some common language. We needed to put some structures in place. We were able to do that. Now we're at the implementation phase, one of the most important pieces. And it's all about monitoring what we're doing so we can make mid-course corrections. That's about monitoring our resources, how we're spending our money efficiently, how we're moving students, how they're responding to what we're doing, and how we're changing things to continue towards our goal. Not waiting till the end with our fingers crossed, saying we hope. We're going to know. We're going to know how we're doing when we get there. And finally, looking ahead to next year. Lots of things on the horizon that could be distractors, but we want to keep our eyes on that prize, and that's student achievement. And we know with the pieces we have in place, the staff we have in place, both at the buildings and here in the central office, we're poised for success. We're very, very looking forward to the scores that are going to be coming out this summer. So, Madam President, members of the board, that concludes my presentation, and we will entertain any questions you may have.
First, I want to thank you for spearheading with Mr. Schweitzer and Dr. Jones the whole Title I reorganization, because that's given us the ability to do this. And then I have just a question about technology. How much are our whiteboards being used? Like, how effectively are our teachers using that?
It's a fantastic question. We actually monitor that through that, when we do those instructional walkthroughs. One of the pieces that we monitor is not just whether it's being used or whether it's not being used, but we monitor whether it's being used. There are three choices. The board is off, the board is being used in a traditional manner, or the board's being used in a transformative manner. And the differentiator there is if it's traditional, you could do that lesson without the Prometheus, without the interactive whiteboard. We're seeing them being used overall in just about 50% of our classrooms currently. And we're really struggling with that and trying to figure out what's the right number. 50% doesn't seem high enough. Yet if you were to tell someone that you would walk into a classroom in Euclid and 1 out of every 2 classrooms would be using technology, some people are very pleased with that. We're not in our department. We're continuing to target professional development at each building. Our support staff is out at the building offering after-school sessions, offering Saturday sessions, offering sessions during the day that wrap around, are focused on using this, the instructional framework and our core instruction, and how the technology supports this. It's not something different, but how it supports the learning. So we're looking to increase that. But right now, it's at about 50%.
Okay.
And Mrs. Sudar, just to add just to that just a little bit, the fact of the matter, the members of the board, the fact of the matter is that at 50%, when we know that the next generation assessment is 100% technology, what we have to do is move the mindset and change the culture as far as understanding how important it is. Because what happens is, and I think of it this way: we don't want any student to be surprised with the assessment. So in other words, they get it, and that's the first time they've seen how they have to do something. They may know how to do it, but then they don't understand the technology behind it. So what we're doing is looking at trying to change that culture and going through that. So as we move through it, one of the questions that we ask is how are they using the technology to be able to support that next generation assessment, because that's what they're going to have to do.
Okay.
If I could just add, PBS did a survey of K through 12 teachers, and the technologies like the whiteboards, electronic whiteboards, and tablets are the most highly desired technology wanted in classroom by teachers in K through 12.
Yeah.
So there is a shift. There is a shift, and I'm glad that we're making that shift. So.
Yeah.
Try to stay on the curve.
Well, we seem to be.
And I just got done taking an educational technology class, so I can appreciate, how difficult it is for a teacher. It's a huge investment of their time, but it's well worthwhile. I mean, it's just so incredibly engaging to the kids, and it's just a different way of instructing. But I appreciate, that portion of it. I mean, it's something that a teacher truly has to talk about fidelity. You have to buy into it, and you have to. It's very time consuming, but it's great that we have it available to us. Oh, thanks.
Just one more comment, if I could. Same survey that I read through PBS. iPads seem to be a more logical choice for tablets in schools. Reason being that kids use it so much for social media, so socially and recreationally kids use it. What we're finding is a vast majority of teachers now are using iPads professionally and educationally, and what they're finding is those two uses, putting the classroom together, are melding beautifully. So I'd be very interested to see how these iPads work out in the next couple of months.
As are we.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Just a comment, but
Go ahead.
just, again, impressed with your presentation, impressed with the leadership you're giving to curriculum instruction, and I think some of that is from our new superintendent, so equally impressed with you, Mr. Bell.
I can't take any credit. It's all Mr. Lyford.
All right, you did call him dessert before you started.
That was sweet of it.
All that did is make me hungry. I agree, hope is not a strategy. It's good that we are moving the mindset and changing the culture. It is great that our new state-of-the-art buildings are matched with evidence-based instructional practices. And that says to me that brighter days are ahead for Euclid City Schools and the Euclid City School students.
Well, I just want to make one comment because I did go to the on the Defiance trip to see the technology that they used. And all of us left saying, wow, if we were going to do a presentation, we already know our staff would do a much better job on the presentation part of it, because the interesting thing was they put everything up on a whiteboard, but there was nothing interactive or anything about it. It was like using it as a projection screen only. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But also, they said that there is a different mindset that you have to use with children. This is now the I generation, where they are used to music in their ear, and they're used to working on things and more independently and so forth. And so I can see we can really do a lot with that. And I think it is important, though, for the public to understand we don't allow them, even though they have, let's say they have an iPad of their own, that they're not on Facebook when they're in school. Okay, that's out of school time. You can be on Facebook, but in school it's not there. It's not available. I think that was one of the things that eased my mind on students using that kind of technology. But I think that our students are ready for it. I think our staff is doing a good job with what we have so far. And I'm looking forward to a lot more of them using the Promethean boards as engaging tools, as opposed to being just a screen up there that you can use with an overhead projector. Shows how far back I go. And I just think it's important that we do stay ahead of technology. Euclid has always been on the leading edge of technology. We've been recognized by the state with that. And I think that, we just need to keep pushing it along, and I think we will see results out of this. I love your core instruction piece, and I love the forms that go with it. I think this is, it's a good display, a good visual for people to understand how it all works together.
Yeah. And I'm just going to as we bring it to closure, just the idea behind this evening was to be able to try to connect a couple of things. One is to be able to connect the fact that the early and often, you're going to hear some of that with every one of the departments, the early and often. We know how important it is for us to know what's going on early and often, so that we can support our teachers. And the other thing is that you will hear the term intentional. When we go into looking at different strategies that we're trying to use, there is a method to the madness that we have, and we're really trying to be really intentional about what we are trying to accomplish, and making sure that we're all the same, doing the same thing, and really clear about what that message is. And I think Mr. Lysak led off with this. The other piece that I think is really important is the fact that we all speak the same language. When you have a different interpretation. I had a chance to spend some time in China, and when I was there, I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know what anybody else was talking about. It was really uncomfortable for a while. So it's important that you understand what that language is, and so educationally it's the same thing. And we want to make sure that we're able to do that. And the bottom line is that we really want to support these people who are here tonight, these teachers that are on the front line of making this happen. And we have to get out of the way to make that happen. In order to do that, we have to be really clear about what it is we're doing to be able to support them, because they've got a tough job, and we want to make sure that we make it, we do everything possible to make it as easy on them as we can. So that's our ultimate goal. So Mr. Lysak, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your I'm sorry.
Okay, we have two more.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
just, and you already shut the presentation down, but I think that when you talk about support, and that was the slide that you had put up, I had concerns last year about implementing our new Title I. And I think that this slide was exactly the reason why you were able to sell me on it. You have increased the number of students you serve from 263 to 609. That was the key. And that's talking about support. Is that number one, we need to support our students. If we can increase the number of students that are going to receive support, I'm all for that. The other thing, too, is that we've increased our full-time personnel and our part-time personnel. Hourly tutors, I'm assuming, fall under that part-time personnel. Or, yes. And the only question I had was, how were they trained? And I was glad that you were able to answer that they did get 2 weeks before students arrived of some professional development. And then they have continuing education, I'm assuming, all throughout the year?
Yeah, once a month, we pull them all out here after they're done with their tutoring session. So outside of the tutoring day, we pull them out here. Mr. Ferlito leads that professional development, and oftentimes he'll tap into the expertise of a coach or another teacher to come out and lead that professional development. What's really exciting, Mrs. Lizey, is that we're now getting to the point where we even have individuals within that tutor group who are feeling comfortable enough to step up and lead their peers in professional development. Something we didn't even fathom would happen. It was a fantastic unintended consequence.
And then lastly, we've moved our intervention from reading to reading and math, which I think is very important, and monitoring 3 times a year to weekly. That's the key. So that slide there, that was the summation of exactly what this work entailed, and perfect summation for that support slide.
I remember last March, you and John Schweitzer and Dr. Jones, we've all met. I wasn't quite sure how this all Title I worked, and I was very nervous about we were opening new schools and all these changes happened. I thought, wow, it's just way too many changes. How are we going to know if any one thing works? I mean, you guys sat back there and go, okay, let's get her out of it, teach her what's going on so she can learn, and then, I understand a lot better. And the number of tutors we've hired, and I think last meeting, we approved a few more tutors. They'll be there in January, which is really showing that this need is working, and it sounds like we're getting more bang for the buck. We're getting more, we're getting more help. But one of the things I saw here on this reading intervention slide was I was kind of surprised at how well Forest Park was doing, since it was, I thought from my last set of scores I'd seen how Central was ahead of Forest Park. And now I was looking here at this testing, it seems, so it's obviously, is there more students getting the intervention over at Forest Park?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. We actually are, currently we had a system in place, and this is, again, knowing early and knowing how things are working. We had a system in place for students in our reading support classes to cap the classes at 16. There was some miscommunication. The Forest Park students actually exceeded that by a few. We decided that we would give it until Christmas to see how that was going. If we needed to back those numbers on to make that class manageable, what's interesting is larger class size, just by a few students, not exponentially. It's not 16 students at Central and 32 students at Forest Park. It's 16 students at Central, and at Forest Park we're looking at 20, 21, 22 students. We're seeing some fabulous results. So one action step we have is to bring those 2 intervention teachers together, say, what's going on, what strategies can we learn from one another, how are we monitoring the supports for that. So yeah, we wouldn't have known that if we weren't monitoring on that weekly basis.
But I also noticed here with Arbor, I was really impressed here with how Arbor was doing. So I mean, it sounds like all the pieces of the puzzle is working together right now. And that's why we want to keep working together.
That is our goal.
Nice job.
Ted, are we doing the same interventions in math at the middle schools, or is the data just not reported here?
Yes, actually in math, it was a brand new program in math. The elementary math coaches knew about this Do the Math. They proposed it last year, and we were able to get an early jump on that and essentially purchase the Do the Math with last year's title funds. So it arrived earlier. With the middle school's funding not coming in until later, there was a delay in us being able to purchase that intervention and do the training. So once we had the intervention and training, and you have to have 3 data points to trend whether or not those students are on track, and we will just be receiving that data point this week. This week, I think, Mr. Ferlito? Yeah. We should have that data point.
Okay.
So at our next presentation, we'll be reporting on how K-8 students are doing in mathematics.
Great. No.
Okay. Very nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think the next item, Madam Chair, members of the board, is just the second reading of the policy revisions that we had at last week's board meetings. Really nothing other than the official second reading, and I just didn't know if there were any questions or anything that we would entertain. Basically, just to review, they were law changes that were made in the policy that we needed to implement.
Right. Okay, we need a motion for the second reading.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sudar, second. Second by Mrs. DeAngelis. Did any board members have any questions on the policies? I think you did a good explanation of them. Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Smith? Yes. Mrs. Sudar?
Yes.
Mrs. Van Hoen?
Yes.
Mrs. DeAngelis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lysy?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is to go into executive session for legal matters. The board will not be taking any action after our executive session, so you would be free to leave knowing that we're not going to be
suddenly springing anything on you. So at this time, we'll take a motion to go into executive session. Someone?
Madam Chair, I will make the motion that the board go into executive session for this discussion of legal matters.
Thank you. Moved by Mr. Smith, second by Mrs. Sudar. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Sudar.
Yes.
Mrs. Van Ho.
Yes.
Mrs. De Angelis.
Yes.
Mrs. Lysy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for coming out tonight.